the other day or last week, Tennessee, no, excuse me. I think either was last week. I can't remember the dates anymore. But within the last week, Tennessee obviously filed a lawsuit against the NCAA and tried to get through a restraining order where the NCAA could not investigate them for NIL laws. Joe, that was denied in court. I think for me, I'm going to continue to say what I've been saying about this Tennessee thing. Joe, I want to know if they did it, right? Like, I want to know if you have a quarterback on a plane with a booster, okay? You're trying to change so many things in college football. You're trying to get the NCAA to stop investigating things. And the one thing that nobody seems to want to talk about is, did they break rules? And that temporary restraining order continues to allow the NCAA to investigate this situation with Nico Iamaleava.
Yeah, as much as I hate to concede this, I actually think that you're right. You know, we had that whole battle on, I think that was last Wednesday when we had this discussion, Blake. And it really kills me to sit here and say I think that does really factor into the discussion, because it's not going to impact the court case, but it's just going to impact the discussion overall. It is going to impact the implications of the conversation, because yes, the act of him being on an airplane and trying to get him to the campus and Nico being the central focus of their recruiting, it is an inducement. It is an inducement made by the University of Tennessee. But one thing on the flip side of this, though, is it shouldn't matter, you know, and this is where all this is going to come down to. What the court, or the judge rather, that was seeing this, that denied that temporary restraining order, believes that the states are going to be the winners in this regardless. So it almost feels like he's giving the NCAA a little bit of a handicap in a way, in order to make this a little bit more of a level playing ground.
I just don't understand. Like, that's my fear in all of this, okay, is that they're going to say, well, hey, you can, you know, try to persuade anybody to come to your college, regardless if they're an athlete or not. And, Joe, I think it's a slippery slope if they do and say that, because then who investigates recruiting violations? And I think the biggest thing that nobody seems to, or it seems to go over everybody's head, if you think it's the Wild Wild West right now, what's going to happen to all these programs who now know that they could just sue the NCAA and there's nothing going to come of it? Like, there's nothing going to come of it. You can't get hit for recruiting violations. So you lift any enforcement whatsoever. Like, what are we doing here? What are we talking about? Joe, I agree with you on being able to persuade or try to talk to a kid for NIL, paying players. I'm all for that. What I'm not all for is people saying the NCAA is dead. They should go away. They should go bye-bye. And what do you think's good? This is the reason why we're in the situations we are now. Not thinking through what the realistic nature of this should be. Like, can we take a moment to just take a step back and ask ourselves, did they do it? Uh-oh.
Well, okay, but Blake, I don't know if you lost me for a second. Can you hear me? Like,
we lost you there for just a second now, but you're back though.
Okay. I think this is where this whole conversation though gets really confusing. But I almost don't want to go down the rabbit hole of did they do it again, because we wasted so much time trying to have a coherent argument about it, and it completely killed the whole point of this conversation.
And that's fine, but they're going to win the antitrust law because you can pay players. But what they shouldn't win is being investigated if they broke recruiting violations.
Yes. My whole point, though, here, and you bring up the most important part, is that a lot of fans, and I was one of these people saying this, are almost just demanding that the NCAA go away. And it's not that simple. It's not something so simple that we can just remove the NCAA from the conversation. They can't just get taken out of the equation. They can't just get absolved and disappear into space, because like you're talking about, if there is not some sort of bridge between whatever ends up being the future of college football, it does end up becoming a convoluted mess. At the end of the day, the NCAA is on their heels right now. They need to find a way to regain footing. And I feel like my whole argument was last Wednesday is that they're constantly trying to reprove and reestablish rules that are not going to work. They need to create new rules that are going to be better.
Yeah, so I don't think they're going to do that. I'm preparing for the worst case scenario that we leave all of this and say, yeah, I mean, you can, I mean, that there's potentially, okay, a ruling where the NCAA has no bearing. They can't investigate these schools, and things just like, what's to stop, Joe, then tomorrow if this goes through? Actually, the court date's on the 13th. What happens, the day after Valentine's Day? Does a booster get on a plane and go see a kid and start offering him large amounts of money, okay, to go to the school that he wants? We're not stopping anything. Like, I just think that, again, I'm not a fan of the NCAA, but to say that there should be no enforcement or no rule, like, Joe, if they go away, I fear what comes of that.
Well, okay, but here's the thing at the end of the day, and what I'm kind of getting at here is that them trying to move the goalposts in order to retroactively punish Tennessee the way that they're doing is what's killing the foundation of them trying to regain their footing. The only direction that they can go in to eliminate any of this stuff is by making more of it legal, by making players salaried. And like we talked about the other day with the Dartmouth stuff, unionization of athletes needs to be on the table. It needs to be on the table now and soon in order to remove the boosters' capability, because at the end of the day, the way that you prevent the inducement from happening is if there's a salary. If there is a consistent salary for these athletes and for these players that they can make, they're no longer in a position to be induced, because we know where the money is coming from, and it's not coming under the table or while on a plane or through a McDonald's paper bag.
Okay, I understand that, but I have one question for you before I move on. You ready?
Okay.
What happens in the time frame between the NCAA not being able to investigate teams for recruiting violations and them paying players as employees?
It's going to run amok. I mean, there's nothing that they did. That they dug this for themselves. They dug this for themselves.
It doesn't matter who dug it. It has no bearing on who dug what. You got to go out there and fix it. You cannot allow for Joe. It could be 5-7 years before these guys and these kids are paid employees. And so what you're going to have is you're going to have guys like you and myself constantly complaining, okay, for the next 7 years that, I mean, until they fix it, and they're not fixing anything.
I get that, and I understand that. But what I'm trying to get at here is, by this whole action that they did with Tennessee, put themselves in a shit position. Because like you just talked about now, it's going to take them even longer to get to this point where they can have this unionization, a standard salary for players. They just set themselves back a few steps. And like you talked about, there could be a couple of years, if not 5 years, of massive recruiting violations like you're talking about that teams can now get away with because they can just go along and sue schools.
And
if
just
they
say
feel like they get away with it. Right.
We're going down too slippery of a slope. If we do it, Joe, we're in trouble as college football. I'm just saying.